Some moments change everything, even before you understand why. Maya Brooks whispered to herself as she stepped into the towering lobby of the Manhattan high-rise, the polished marble floors reflecting the golden afternoon sunlight that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, her heels clicking softly, echoing off the glass and steel around her. And as she adjusted the strap of her sleek, modern bag, her eyes caught a figure across the expansive space, Alexander Knight, standing with his tall, poised frame in a perfectly tailored midnight suit, the light catching the sharp angles of his fair white skin and strong jaw, his piercing eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The city outside blurred into streaks of gold and silver, the hum of traffic distant and muted compared to the heartbeat-like tension in the room. And as she moved forward, every step measured and deliberate, the subtle sway of her posture conveying confidence despite the whirl of curiosity and apprehension swirling in her chest. She noticed the small details, the crisp folds of his suit, the faint gleam of his watch catching the light, the quiet authority in the tilt of his shoulders, and felt an inexplicable pull toward this man whose presence seemed to command not only attention but thoughtfulness. And just as she approached, a breeze from the partially open lobby doors tousled her hair, the strands brushing her cheek as if nudging her into the moment, and Alexander's gaze did not waver, holding hers with a careful, deliberate intensity, an unspoken conversation forming between them through posture, gesture, and the quiet power of mutual recognition. The space around them suddenly charged with a cinematic tension, shadows lengthening across the marble floors, refracting the golden sunlight into abstract patterns, and she realized with a jolt of awareness that this encounter, so unexpected and accidental in nature, could be the pivot point of her life, a door opening into a world of elegance, responsibility, and subtle complexity she had not yet imagined. And as the ambient hum of the city seeped through the lobby, mingling with the distant clink of elevator doors and the soft footsteps of other visitors, Maya felt a sense of presence, of being observed and measured, yet not judged, the delicate balance of power, curiosity, and mutual intrigue making each moment stretch and breathe with anticipation. And when Alexander took a slow step forward, the light glinting along the edges of the polished railing, there was a quiet acknowledgement in the tilt of his head, a flicker of something unspoken that hinted at both challenge and possibility. And Maya adjusted her bag, squared her shoulders, and met that gaze with her own steady, reflective look, aware that the interplay of subtle signals, poised postures, and measured movements was shaping the entire atmosphere of the space. The lobby now transformed from a neutral architectural marvel into a stage for personal discovery and the unfolding of an intricate emotional narrative. And with every moment, the tension built, the air seeming to hum with potential energy, as both of them navigated the initial steps of awareness, perception, and the first spark of connection, a dynamic that was neither rushed nor forced, yet fully charged with the quiet drama of two lives colliding in a single instant. And as she took a careful, deliberate step closer, the golden light falling across her rich dark skin, highlighting the contours of her face and the gleam in her eyes, she felt the weight of anticipation, curiosity, and the subtle thrill of possibility, knowing that in this precise, charged moment, the story of her encounter with Alexander Knight was beginning, a story that would unfold with intricate layers of trust, insight, and connection, stretching from this high-rise lobby into a world of elegance, challenge, and unforeseen emotion that neither of them could yet predict. Every detail, the soft rustle of her dress, the gentle shift of his stance, the interplay of light and shadow, contributing to a cinematic opening that set the tone for everything to come, leaving Maya both breathless and acutely aware that this single meeting, accidental as it seemed, might define the course of the days and decisions ahead. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan high-rise, casting long streaks across the polished marble floors, and Maya Brooks moved carefully through the space, adjusting the strap of her sleek bag as she absorbed the gravity of the previous encounter with Alexander Knight, her mind racing with the subtle emotions, fleeting impressions, and unspoken tension that had passed between them in the lobby. And as she approached the reception area, the sunlight caught the soft waves of her rich dark hair and the smooth contours of her face, highlighting the alertness and thoughtfulness in her expression. And Alexander, now closer and more composed, observed her with a steady gaze, the tailored midnight suit accentuating his commanding posture, fair white skin glowing slightly in the filtered morning light, his sharp eyes studying her with a mix of curiosity and restrained intrigue, the space between them charged with an undercurrent of anticipation that made the air feel taut, almost alive, as the city outside thrummed quietly below. And when he gestured toward the large glass conference table, inviting her to sit, Maya felt a pull of both hesitation and fascination, aware that every movement, every glance, and the faintest flicker of expression could communicate volumes without a single word being exchanged. And as they settled into their respective positions, the sunlight catching the edges of the table and reflecting in subtle patterns on the floor, Alexander began to speak, his voice even and measured, laying out details of the upcoming contracts and responsibilities with precision. And yet beneath the clarity of his words there was a trace of warmth, a soft modulation that suggested openness and a willingness to observe her reactions. And Maya listened intently, noting the nuances of his phrasing, the careful pauses that allowed space for reflection, and the almost imperceptible tilt of his head that indicated attention and consideration. And as they moved through documents, charts, and schedules, the dialogue flowed with a rhythm of strategic focus, subtle insight, and mutual observation, creating a sense of structured collaboration that was at once demanding and quietly exhilarating. And when Alexander excused himself briefly to take a call, the moment of solitude allowed Maya to reflect on the progression of her emotions, the interplay of curiosity, intrigue, and cautious engagement that had developed since their initial meeting. And she recognized that this environment, while opulent and exacting, was also fertile ground for connection, understanding, and measured influence. The polished floors, soft furnishings, and expansive city views serving as a backdrop that mirrored both the scale of opportunity and the subtlety required to navigate the emerging relationship. And as Alexander returned, resuming the discussion with renewed clarity and precise gestures, Maya felt a quiet confidence settling in, a recognition that her presence, observations, and thoughtful contributions were not only acknowledged but valued, and the space between them, once tense and charged, now resonated with the possibility of collaboration, mutual respect, and the gradual emergence of trust, every word, movement, and reflective glance contributing to a cinematic rhythm of interaction, anticipation, and unfolding connection that hinted at deeper understanding and the promise of shared discovery, leaving both poised on the threshold of a narrative that was only beginning to reveal its complexity, depth, and potential for meaningful engagement in the days ahead. The afternoon sun filtered through the expansive windows of Alexander Knight's penthouse, casting a warm glow over the polished marble floors and reflecting softly on the sleek surfaces of the office. And Maya Brooks moved with deliberate grace, her eyes scanning the city skyline beyond while her mind traced the details of the morning's discussions, the subtle gestures, measured pauses, and carefully chosen words that had shaped the rhythm of their interaction. And as she approached the long, glass conference table, the sunlight caught the rich dark tones of her skin and the soft waves of her hair, highlighting the intensity of her focused expression. And Alexander stood nearby, his tailored midnight suit impeccable, fair white skin illuminated by the sunlight, posture commanding yet inviting, every movement precise but tempered with a quiet attentiveness that made his presence both formidable and approachable. And as they reviewed reports and charts together, the subtle interplay of authority and collaboration unfolded, his tone steady and deliberate, emphasizing clarity and strategy while leaving room for her insight. The small nods, slight shifts of his stance, and careful eye contact reinforcing the growing trust and understanding between them. And Maya found herself absorbing not only the content of the documents but the nuances of interaction, the rhythm of conversation, and the unspoken acknowledgement of each other's competence and perspective. The city hum below, providing a gentle, constant backdrop that contrasted with the focused intensity of the room. And as she highlighted key points and offered suggestions, Alexander's measured attention and the faint arch of his brow conveyed both challenge and recognition. the delicate balance of influence, observation, and contribution weaving together a tapestry of emerging partnership. And when they paused to consider a complex proposal for the upcoming philanthropic initiative, the soft sunlight reflected off polished surfaces, creating subtle patterns across the room that seemed to underscore the layered depth of their collaboration. And Maya felt the quiet thrill of participation, a sense that her voice mattered, that her analysis and perspective could shape outcomes, and that the interplay of attentive observation, reflection, and strategic thought was laying the groundwork for a bond rooted in trust, respect, and emerging alignment. And as Alexander excused himself briefly to take a call, the stillness left in his absence allowed Maya a moment of reflection, absorbing the cadence of their interactions, the careful orchestration of words, gestures, and glances, and the awareness that every detail, every nuance, every carefully considered action contributed to the slowly unfolding narrative of collaboration, understanding, and connection. And as he returned, resuming the discussion with renewed focus, the room seemed to vibrate with the energy of attentive engagement, the city outside shimmering in the late afternoon light, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls. And Maya realized that these hours of concentrated interaction were shaping not just the immediate decisions at hand, but also the deeper dynamic between them, a narrative of mutual insight, measured trust, and emerging understanding, laying the foundation for the complex, nuanced, and emotionally resonant story that was only beginning to take form in this space. Every glance, gesture, and thoughtful word contributing to a cinematic rhythm that would carry through the unfolding chapters of their shared journey. As the late afternoon sun began to filter through the towering windows of Alexander Knight's penthouse, casting long golden streaks across the polished marble floors, Maya Brooks moved with deliberate calm, adjusting her posture and her attention to the documents spread neatly across the sleek conference table, the subtle shimmer of light reflecting off her rich dark skin and the soft waves of her hair, while Alexander stood nearby, his tailored midnight suit impeccable, fair white skin, catching the glow of the sun, eyes focused yet inviting, every movement precise and measured, the interplay of authority and attentiveness creating a rhythm that seemed to pull the space into a quiet, cinematic tension. And as they reviewed charts, reports, and schedules for an important philanthropic event, the delicate balance of conversation, observation, and reflection became apparent, each word chosen with care, each gesture intentional, the soft rustle of papers and faint clink of glass, creating an understated soundtrack to their interaction. And Maya noted the subtle cues in Alexander's posture, the tilt of his head, the brief flicker of his expression, recognizing both challenge and encouragement in the nuances of his attention, and she contributed her insights with a careful poise, her analytical observations weaving seamlessly with his guidance, the room filled with a focused energy that was both structured and dynamic, allowing space for collaboration, influence, and measured engagement. And when a moment of pause arrived, Maya took the opportunity to absorb the environment, the panoramic view of the city with its twinkling lights and muted hum, the reflections in the polished surfaces, and the soft play of light and shadow across the room, feeling a sense of both awe and grounded awareness, understanding that every choice, every glance, every subtle interaction contributed to a larger narrative of trust, respect, and emerging alignment. And as Alexander returned from a brief call, the continuity of attention and the smooth resumption of dialogue emphasized the depth of their engagement, the subtle but meaningful acknowledgement of each other's perspective and competence building a foundation for ongoing collaboration. And the cadence of the discussion, punctuated by thoughtful reflection, strategic decision-making, and quiet acknowledgement, created a cinematic rhythm that drew Maya further into the world of precision, influence, and connection, while also deepening the personal resonance of her presence within it. And as the late afternoon light shifted to a softer glow, illuminating the textures of the furniture, the polished surfaces, and the contours of their faces, Maya realized that the unfolding narrative was no longer just about documents, schedules, or obligations, but about the delicate interplay of understanding, insight, and mutual respect, the emergent trust threading through their interactions like a subtle current. And she felt the quiet thrill of awareness, the anticipation of future collaboration, and the sense that each decision, each gesture, and each reflection would carry forward into a shared story of partnership, alignment, and measured discovery that had only just begun, setting the stage for further growth, connection, and revelation as the sun dipped lower behind the Manhattan skyline. The morning light spilled across the polished floors of Sterling Industries' executive floor, casting long shadows that mirrored Alitel Blessing's nervous heartbeat. She adjusted the silk of her cream blouse for the 10th time, wishing she could disappear into the marble and brass around her, her long dark hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders as she clutched her ruined coffee-stained blouse, the smell of caramel lingering faintly in the air. And then the impossible happened. The door opened, time slowed, and she saw him, tall, imposing, his charcoal suit impeccable, storm gray eyes meeting hers in the mirror's reflection, her hands flying to shield herself with the backup blouse. And for a moment they simply stared, the air thick with tension, curiosity, and an unspoken understanding that something extraordinary had just occurred. He didn't move, just observed, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth, transforming his aristocratic features into a mix of approachability and danger, and Alitel felt her cheeks burn. A blush of mortification tinged with an unbidden thrill, while every second stretched into an eternity, the room's luxurious silence amplifying the weight of the encounter, her heart pounding audibly in the quiet. Yet in his measured calmness, there was a promise of protection, a subtle assurance that, despite the chaos of spilled coffee and mistaken privacy, she was safe, respected, and seen. And as he finally stepped aside to let her change, the words, gentle yet commanding, "Plenty of time to change your blouse. I'll make sure no one else wanders in," left her trembling with a mixture of relief and anticipation, and as she finished, adjusted her hair and smoothed her blouse, stepping out into the hallway, she found him leaning casually against the wall, phone in hand, the same enigmatic smile returning as their eyes met once more, a spark igniting an unspoken connection, a thread that would pull them into a story of unexpected meetings, slow-burning intrigue, and a dance of power, charm, and mutual fascination that neither of them had anticipated. And though her first day as junior marketing coordinator had started with chaos, embarrassment, and an almost tragic coffee incident, by the time she was ushered toward orientation, a quiet thrill of possibility and the tantalizing sense of fate's hand in their collision had taken root, marking the beginning of an unforgettable journey of trust, careful attention, and an emotional bond that promised to transform both their lives. The soft glow of early morning filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan high-rise, bathing the office in a warm, golden light that reflected off the polished marble floors and sleek surfaces, and Maya Brooks moved carefully through the space, her rich dark skin illuminated by the sun as she adjusted her blouse and smoothed the soft waves of her hair, feeling a mixture of anticipation and reflection from the previous day's encounters, while Alexander Knight stood near the expansive desk, his tailored midnight suit impeccable, fair white skin catching the light, eyes focused yet measured, every movement deliberate, the subtle balance of authority and approachability radiating from his posture. And as they prepared for the morning briefing, the documents, charts, and proposals laid out before them seemed almost to shimmer with potential, their meticulous arrangement reflecting a world of precision, strategy, and calculated influence. And when Maya spoke, her voice calm but firm, pointing out details and offering insights, Alexander listened intently, nodding slightly, acknowledging her observations with the faintest arch of an eyebrow, the interplay of gestures, glances, and expressions creating a rhythm of collaboration that was at once structured and quietly dynamic. And as they reviewed schedules, upcoming meetings, and strategic initiatives, the dialogue unfolded with a cinematic cadence, each pause, glance, and carefully measured comment contributing to a growing sense of alignment and understanding. And Maya felt a subtle thrill of agency and recognition, the knowledge that her perspective was valued and that her contributions could shape decisions and outcomes in ways that were both meaningful and respected. And when Alexander stepped aside briefly to take a call, the quiet space left allowed her to absorb the ambience, from the reflective surfaces to the panoramic city view, and to consider how the subtle dynamics of interaction, trust, and observation were shaping a narrative of collaboration and emergent partnership. And as he returned, the flow of discussion resumed seamlessly, the interplay of strategy, insight, and mutual attention weaving a fabric of connection that was both professional and subtly personal. The soft hum of the city below providing a steady, grounding rhythm to their focused energy, and with each shared observation, thoughtful reflection, and nuanced gesture, Maya felt the delicate threads of understanding, trust, and influence intertwining, creating a cinematic moment of quiet anticipation and emerging alignment that promised to shape not only the day ahead, but the evolving story of engagement, respect, and careful discovery between them. And as the morning progressed and sunlight shifted across the room, the polished surfaces and glass panels capturing glimmers of light, she realized that every decision, every interaction, and every carefully chosen word contributed to the foundation of a shared journey, a narrative of insight, collaboration, and growing connection that was unfolding with subtle elegance, poised for the chapters yet to come and the deeper understanding that would continue to develop between them. By late afternoon, the golden light of the sun stretched across the polished floors of Alexander Knight's penthouse, casting long reflections over the sleek surfaces and highlighting the subtle textures of the office space. And Maya Brooks moved through the room with deliberate attention, her rich dark skin glowing softly in the warm light as she smoothed the fabric of her blouse and adjusted her posture, feeling a blend of anticipation, reflection, and cautious curiosity from the interactions that had unfolded earlier, while Alexander stood near the expansive desk, tailored suit impeccable, fair white skin illuminated, eyes focused yet thoughtful, every gesture measured and intentional, radiating authority tempered by subtle attentiveness. And as they reviewed schedules, proposals, and strategic initiatives together, the dynamic of collaboration emerged, each exchange of words and glances layered with nuance, creating a rhythm of observation, insight, and careful engagement, the soft hum of the city below blending with the gentle rustle of papers and occasional clink of glass to form an understated soundtrack to their focused energy. And Maya noted the smallest cues, the tilt of his head, the slight arch of his brow, the subtle shift in posture that indicated attention, challenge, and encouragement simultaneously, and she responded with deliberate clarity, contributing observations and thoughtful suggestions. The interaction weaving a tapestry of emerging trust, alignment, and mutual recognition. And as Alexander stepped aside momentarily to take a brief call, the stillness left in his absence allowed Maya to reflect on the cadence of their communication, the subtle ways in which authority, attentiveness, and openness intersected, and the realization that every gesture, glance, and carefully chosen word was shaping a narrative of collaboration and understanding. And when he returned, resuming the discussion seamlessly, the room seemed to vibrate with quiet energy, the interplay of focus, reflection, and strategic insight forming a cinematic rhythm, each moment deepening their awareness of one another. And as they moved toward the review of an intricate philanthropic proposal, sunlight filtered through the large windows, creating patterns of light and shadow across the surfaces, highlighting textures and expressions, and Maya felt a quiet thrill of agency and engagement, recognizing that her contributions were valued and that the careful interplay of observation, reflection, and measured action was building a foundation of trust and partnership, a narrative of subtle connection, growing understanding, and emerging alignment that would shape the decisions, insights, and interactions in the days to come, every glance, gesture, and thoughtful consideration threading together to create a story of collaboration, insight, and quiet anticipation poised to unfold with both professional precision and personal resonance. The golden light of late afternoon stretched across the Manhattan skyline, spilling into Alexander Knight's penthouse and casting warm reflections on the polished marble floors and sleek surfaces, and Maya Brooks moved with a deliberate grace, her rich dark skin glowing softly in the sunlight, adjusting her posture and smoothing the fabric of her blouse as she prepared to engage with the strategic documents laid across the long glass conference table. the hum of the city below a gentle backdrop to the focused energy of the room, while Alexander, standing tall and composed, his tailored midnight suit impeccable, fair white skin catching the shifting light, eyes sharp yet measured, observed her attentively. Every gesture controlled and purposeful, the subtle rhythm of his movements conveying both authority and an invitation to thoughtful collaboration. And as they delved into the detailed review of proposals, schedules, and philanthropic initiatives, the interplay of conversation, reflective glances, and deliberate gestures created a cadence of engagement and quiet anticipation. Maya, noting the slight tilts of his head, the faint arch of his brow, the nuanced inflection in his tone, all of which indicated recognition, challenge, and consideration in equal measure, and she responded with careful poise, presenting her observations and insights, the back and forth of analysis, reflection, and strategic discussion weaving a rich tapestry of emerging trust, alignment, and mutual understanding. And as Alexander stepped briefly aside to take a call, the room seemed to breathe in the stillness, allowing Maya a moment to absorb the space, the panoramic view of the city, and the quiet power of subtle cues, the balance of authority and openness, and the evolving rhythm of connection. And upon his return, the dialogue resumed seamlessly, each glance, gesture, and comment reinforcing a cinematic sense of collaboration, anticipation, and emerging partnership. The late sunlight casting long shadows that danced across the floors and walls, highlighting textures and contours, emphasizing the layered depth of interaction, and Maya felt the quiet thrill of influence, recognition, and engagement. The knowledge that her thoughtful contributions mattered within this world of precision, structure, and subtle nuance. And as they moved toward concluding the review of the day's initiatives, the interplay of focus, reflection, and measured action created a compelling rhythm of connection, anticipation, and unfolding understanding, leaving both poised at the threshold of deeper trust, insight, and alignment. With every subtle observation, carefully considered gesture, and reflective glance contributing to the cinematic narrative of partnership, collaboration, and the delicate, evolving story of shared insight and mutual respect that would shape the days and decisions to come. The late afternoon sunlight bathed Alexander Knight's penthouse in a soft golden glow, stretching across the polished marble floors and highlighting the sleek surfaces, and Maya Brooks moved deliberately through the space, the rich dark tones of her skin catching the light as she adjusted her blouse and smoothed her hair, her mind replaying the earlier interactions, the subtle glances, measured pauses, and careful gestures that had created a rhythm of tension, curiosity, and quiet connection. Between them, while Alexander stood near the long conference table, tailored midnight suit impeccable, fair white skin illuminated, eyes focused yet inviting, every movement precise but tempered with subtle attentiveness. And as they reviewed complex proposals, charts, and schedules for upcoming strategic initiatives, the dialogue unfolded with a cadence that blended focus, reflection, and careful engagement. The city below humming softly, its lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. And Maya noticed the nuances in Alexander's expressions, the slight lift of his brow, the deliberate tilt of his head, the controlled yet gentle modulation in his voice, all of which conveyed acknowledgement, challenge, and subtle encouragement. And she responded thoughtfully, presenting observations and suggestions with measured clarity, each exchange reinforcing the emerging alignment and trust. And when he stepped aside briefly to take a call, the pause allowed Maya to reflect on the environment, the panoramic skyline, the interplay of light and shadow, and the quiet power of observation and awareness shaping the dynamic between them. And upon his return, the conversation resumed seamlessly, the room vibrating with a quiet energy born from focus, mutual respect, and the subtle orchestration of authority and attentiveness. And as they moved through a particularly intricate philanthropic proposal, the late sunlight reflecting off polished surfaces and glass panels, creating patterns that seemed to underscore the depth of their engagement, Maya felt a quiet thrill of influence, insight, and participation, aware that her contributions were valued and integral to the decisions unfolding. And the interplay of careful attention, reflective dialogue, and deliberate action wove together a cinematic rhythm of collaboration, anticipation, and emerging partnership, every glance, gesture, and carefully chosen word threading into a narrative of trust, understanding, and connection, leaving both poised on the threshold of insight, strategic alignment, and subtle emotional resonance. The city skyline stretching endlessly beyond the windows as the evening light deepened, emphasizing the unfolding story of engagement, careful observation, and shared purpose between them, a story rich with nuance, anticipation, and the quiet promise of discovery and mutual respect. The soft light of early evening filled Alexander Knight's penthouse, casting long reflections across the polished marble floors and sleek glass surfaces, and Maya Brooks moved carefully through the space, the glow highlighting the rich tones of her dark skin and the gentle waves of her hair, her eyes attentive to the documents and charts spread across the long conference table, while Alexander, standing near the desk in his tailored midnight suit, fair white skin catching the shifting light, observed her with focused intensity, the subtle balance of authority, composure, and measured attentiveness evident in his posture. And as they reviewed schedules, strategic plans, and upcoming philanthropic initiatives, the dialogue unfolded with a rhythm that blended deliberate observation, reflective insight, and thoughtful engagement, every glance, nod, and carefully chosen phrase contributing to a growing alignment and emerging trust. And Maya noted the smallest cues, the tilt of his head, the subtle change in his expression, the gentle modulation of his voice, that signaled acknowledgement, curiosity, and encouragement, and she responded with careful precision, sharing insights, highlighting critical details, and weaving her analysis seamlessly with his guidance. The room alive with quiet energy, the soft hum of the city below providing a grounding backdrop to their focused attention. And when Alexander stepped aside briefly to take a call, the temporary stillness allowed Maya to absorb the environment, the sweeping city views, and the subtle interplay of light, reflection, and spatial awareness, deepening her appreciation of the dynamics at work. And upon his return, the conversation resumed effortlessly, the interplay of thoughtfulness, strategy, and mutual observation creating a cinematic rhythm of collaboration, anticipation, and emerging partnership, every gesture, glance, and considered word threading together to strengthen trust, understanding, and alignment. And as they progressed through a particularly intricate proposal, the late light casting golden patterns on surfaces and facial features, Maya felt a quiet sense of agency, insight, and significance, recognizing that her contributions shaped outcomes and influenced decisions in meaningful ways, and the measured cadence of their dialogue, combined with the subtle dance of attention, reflection, and acknowledgement, created a narrative rich in collaboration, nuanced understanding, and emergent connection, leaving both poised on the cusp of deeper engagement, strategic alignment, and the quiet unfolding of an evolving story of trust, respect, and shared insight that would continue to develop with each subsequent interaction and decision. The soft glow of evening settled over the Manhattan skyline, filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alexander Knight's penthouse, casting long golden streaks across the polished marble floors and reflecting off the sleek surfaces of the office. And Maya Brooks moved through the space with deliberate attention, her rich dark skin illuminated by the fading sunlight as she adjusted the fabric of her blouse and smoothed her hair, a subtle tension of anticipation and reflection lingering from the day's earlier interactions, while Alexander, standing near the expansive conference table in his tailored midnight suit, fair white skin catching the light, observed her with composed attentiveness, every gesture precise yet tempered with quiet patience. And as they reviewed the day's strategic proposals, schedules, and philanthropic initiatives, the conversation unfolded with a measured cadence, each word, glance, and movement layered with nuance, conveying both authority and openness, challenge and acknowledgement. And Maya responded with thoughtful clarity, sharing insights, highlighting important details, and weaving her analysis seamlessly with his guidance. The room alive with quiet energy, the soft hum of the city below providing a subtle rhythmic backdrop to their focused engagement. And when Alexander stepped aside briefly to take a call, the moment of stillness allowed Maya to absorb the environment, the panoramic view of the skyline, and the interplay of light and shadow across polished surfaces, recognizing the subtle dynamics of attention, trust, and influence shaping their evolving partnership. And upon his return, the discussion resumed effortlessly, the ebb and flow of reflective dialogue, strategic observation, and careful consideration creating a cinematic rhythm of collaboration, anticipation, and emerging alignment. Each glance and gesture contributing to a narrative of trust, understanding, and nuanced connection. And as they examined the intricate details of the upcoming initiatives, sunlight fading to a soft amber, Maya felt a quiet thrill of agency, recognition, and significance, understanding that her contributions were valued, that her insight could shape outcomes, and that the interplay of measured attention, thoughtful reflection, and deliberate action was weaving a story of subtle connection, emerging, understanding, and deepening respect, leaving both poised on the threshold of further engagement, strategic alignment, and cinematic storytelling that would continue to evolve with every subsequent observation, gesture, and carefully chosen word, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the windows as the night approached, emphasizing the quiet promise of discovery, collaboration, and trust building between them. The early morning light spilled across the penthouse, soft and golden, reflecting off the polished marble floors and glass panels, and Maya Brooks moved through the space with quiet purpose, her rich dark skin glowing in the sunlight as she adjusted her blouse and smoothed her hair, a sense of anticipation and reflection from the previous day's interactions lingering in her posture, while Alexander Knight stood near the long conference table, tailored midnight suit immaculate, fair white skin, illuminated by the gentle light, eyes focused yet attentive, every gesture precise but softened with subtle attentiveness. And as they began reviewing schedules, proposals, and philanthropic initiatives for the coming week, their conversation unfolded with deliberate cadence, each word, glance, and movement layered with nuance, conveying authority, openness, and emerging trust. And Maya noted the smallest cues, the tilt of his head, the slight arch of his brow, the faint modulation in his voice, that suggested acknowledgement, curiosity, and quiet encouragement, and she responded thoughtfully, offering insights, highlighting key points, and integrating her analysis seamlessly with his guidance. The room filled with quiet energy, the distant hum of the city below providing a grounding rhythm to their focused attention, and when Alexander excused himself briefly to take a call, the moment of stillness allowed Maya to observe the environment, the panoramic skyline, the interplay of light and reflections on surfaces, and the subtle dynamics of attention, trust, and emerging influence shaping their interaction. And upon his return, the dialogue resumed effortlessly, the interplay of reflection, strategic consideration, and careful observation creating a cinematic rhythm of collaboration, anticipation, and alignment, each gesture, glance, and carefully chosen word reinforcing a narrative of trust, understanding, and connection. And as they moved through an intricate set of proposals, sunlight shifting to a warmer hue, Maya felt a quiet sense of agency, insight, and significance, realizing her contributions shaped outcomes, influenced decisions, and strengthened the partnership. The measured cadence of their exchange, the subtle acknowledgement of each other's perspective, and the thoughtful navigation of details weaving together a story of emergent collaboration, nuanced understanding, and quiet emotional resonance, leaving both poised at the threshold of deeper engagement, alignment, and anticipation for the unfolding chapters of their shared journey. The city skyline stretching endlessly beyond the windows, emphasizing the promise of discovery, collaboration, and careful trust building between them. As the first light of dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline, spilling a warm golden hue across Alexander Knight's penthouse, Maya Brooks stood at the edge of the terrace, her rich dark skin glowing softly in the morning light, the city stretching endlessly below as a living mosaic of lights and movement. And she felt a profound sense of reflection and anticipation, recalling the days of careful observation, subtle interaction, and measured engagement that had brought her to this point, while Alexander stood beside her, tailored midnight suit impeccable, fair white skin illuminated by the rising sun, eyes calm yet attentive, every gesture deliberate and tempered with a quiet authority that commanded presence without imposing. And as they turned together to review the plans, proposals, and schedules that lay across the sleek conference table behind them, the interplay of focus, observation, and shared insight wove a rhythm of trust, understanding, and subtle connection, the soft hum of the city below providing a constant, grounding backdrop to their carefully coordinated attention. And Maya noted the nuances in Alexander's posture, the subtle inflections of his tone, the deliberate movements that communicated thoughtfulness, consideration, and openness, and she responded with deliberate clarity, offering insights, highlighting essential details, and integrating her perspective seamlessly with his strategic guidance, creating a cadence of collaboration, mutual respect, and emergent alignment that resonated through the room. The reflective surfaces, polished floors, and large windows amplifying the quiet energy of their interaction. And as the sun rose higher, casting long reflections across the glass and marble, Maya felt a growing sense of agency, significance, and engagement, aware that her contributions were valued and shaping outcomes in ways both immediate and lasting. And Alexander acknowledged each observation with subtle nods and measured attention, the balance of authority, openness, and mutual trust threading through every exchange, every glance, and every careful gesture, creating a cinematic rhythm that combined insight, anticipation, and quiet emotional resonance. And as they concluded the morning review, sunlight illuminating textures and contours in soft patterns, Maya and Alexander stood side by side on the terrace, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the windows, the city alive with possibilities. And she realized that their interactions had cultivated a narrative of connection, trust, and emerging partnership, each moment, reflection, and thoughtful exchange contributing to a story poised for the unfolding chapters of collaboration, alignment, and subtle discovery, a story that would continue to develop with depth, care, and shared insight, leaving them ready to embrace the opportunities and challenges that lay ahead while the golden light of the new day cast a quiet promise of growth, understanding, and enduring engagement between them.